Hi, my name is Erica Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of Helping Hands of Springfield. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I think I'm the last person, so I'm separating you from home, and I'll make it quick. I am a member of the Continuum of Care, the Heartland Continuum of Care Board. I do not come here tonight to speak for that entity. I speak for Helping Hands, my organization. We are in our 31st year of providing emergency shelter, housing, and support services for people who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness. I also have heard on Channel 20 some about the proposed plan. I cannot really comment on that either because I haven't seen a copy of it. The one thing that I would question, though, is the what seems like a pretty excessive amount of money to be allocated to a shelter when our local data makes it clear that our shortage is, as you pointed out, Alderman Gregory, housing. Meaning supportive housing and rapid rehousing with the appropriate and comprehensive support services to keep people housed. So what I really want to do tonight is offer what I think that you're asking for, which is some sort of common goal we can all get around and a starting point and a base that we know what we're trying to work toward. It feels like a lot of what we do is very knee-jerk and reactive. We work with people who are in crisis. Everyone who comes to Helping Hands is in crisis. We can't be in crisis too. We have to be wise and compassionate. We have to be smart and we have to be kind. And so I'm going to share the goal Helping Hands is working from. I would hope, and I know others must join, because we cannot and we will not do this alone. I think Springfield and Sangamon County should set the goal right now that we will end homelessness in Sangamon County in 5 years. We can do this. Other communities have done this, and there's no reason we can't as well. When I say the word end, though, we have to be very clear what that means. It means making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring for all of our citizens. It's what you call functional zero. But I think, especially being the land of Lincoln and being concerned about all our community members, we would say we will stop at nothing short of ending homelessness. And when you look at some of the media and social media, and when you hear some of the conversations, right now this feels kind of impossible. But I always go back to St. Francis of Assisi. When something feels impossible, you start with what's necessary, you do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. And there are three things. I don't have a lot of time, 2 minutes left, but there is a structure we can use. There is a plan that we can start from right now that will give us the tools. This isn't a mystery to us. There are three necessary things that we have to do, and I'm coming to talk to you as council members because we need your leadership in this community. The first thing is that we have to develop our system, and the evidence-based model that we are actually using some is a crisis response system, and these are our coordinated teams working together on all parts of homeless to housed. And that's the thing. We have to focus on housing. All parts of the system are important, but the ultimate goal and the direction is toward housing. Our guiding principles are we prevent homelessness whenever we can, we get people the right resources as fast as we possibly can, and our goal is to help them resolve their health and housing crisis through housing with appropriate supports. The second necessary thing we must do is build our team. And that's a job of our continuum of care. We already have a lot of great team members in our community, and I wish we would focus on some of our wins, because we've had a lot of them recently, although you wouldn't know it by watching the news. All housing programs in our continuum during COVID-19 maintained or grew. And we all had, from our grantors, permission to slink back and to close some if we felt we needed to, and none of us did. Helping Hands increased our shelter beds. We improved our permanent supportive housing program to go to 100%, and we also started rapid rehousing. And since April 2020, we have housed 52 people in our community who were previously homeless. I tell you this because it's possible, because it's already happening. You do have to address unsheltered homelessness. But it's not going to be the same model we've always used. And 2 years ago, I was up here standing telling you that that's not sustainable, effective, or efficient. And we know that. The representative who was just up here talks about that. We see the effects of it downtown. But this is not how it has to be. Other communities have adopted other models that don't just try to take one agency that's already focusing on housing and put this on them on a seasonal or temporary standpoint. That doesn't work. Your agencies who are housing people should be encouraged to continue housing people, not be pulled away to provide reactive services. St. Paul did it with one model. Cincinnati and many other communities have done it with another model. So my message to you is there are options. We just can't start in October if we want to have one by November, and it's not too late now. And we actually have done this in the past. What we need from you as leaders is we need for you to develop a coalition with inclusive representation to help us find what that looks like and where it should be. So finally, I know I am out of time, but I have 3 things I'm going to ask of you tonight as our leaders. First, why don't we set our goal to end homelessness in 5 years today? Why don't we establish that goal, understanding that we all are responsible toward working toward it? Secondly, organize an inclusive coalition of community members to determine what we want overflow shelter to look like. So overflow shelter operates within the crisis response system, is appropriately structured, and is effective and sustainable for as long as we need it. And finally, most importantly, I ask you to allocate resources when they become available strategically based on our community's data and recommendations from our continuum of care. Josh Sabo is our director for the continuum. I can't speak highly enough of him. He's a great leader. He's a very competent professional, and he represents us well. Our continuum should provide the data. We should provide the recommendations, and we honestly also should be held accountable for what we do and the outcomes we provide. So I would, in conclusion, say thank you. We are depending on all of you to lead us. Solving and resolving homelessness in our community for the good of our most vulnerable citizens is achievable, and it's attainable, and it's possible if we choose to do so. Okay? So unsheltered homelessness was a crisis 2 years ago, and it's a fiasco now, as we all know. There are a lot of contributing reasons for that. There are decisions that our community over the last 10 to 15 years didn't make, and one is not investing in housing and in supportive housing. We also have a situation, honestly, where we've created a scenario where people can get on Facebook, ask for whatever they want, and it's delivered to them. I'm not saying people are making good decisions, but I'm saying if we know they're in crisis, why are we enabling some of the decisions that they're making that are destructive for them and other people? The situation, you cannot just move people out, especially if they don't have a place to go. We absolutely need the overflow shelter. But we also need to ensure, if you look at our data, that our current shelter beds are being filled, and we need to encourage people to do that and not discourage them away from shelter right now. I think we have potentially several options, but I think it looks like that the main sticking point has always been, for anything even perceived as shelter, whether it's actually shelter or not, is always the location. So instead of waiting until October and then worrying about location and then everyone kind of is back against the wall, I would say you need to get community leadership together that is inclusive and represents the entire community. Now, if you look at what Springfield did about 30 years ago, that group that they chose to tap to do that Mayor Langfelder 30 years ago was the faith community. Helping Hands was created out of that. It was the Christian, the Jewish, and the Muslim community that came together. Now, the situation then was different than it is now, but what I'm suggesting is you need that kind of inclusiveness. What can't happen is it becomes the city against the agencies, and it's constant, well, this person didn't do this. We need the representation of local government. We need the representation of service providers. I would say particularly the continuum. We need the representation of potential funders, but we need an inclusive voice as well that is going to be able to offer some objective guidance and that we can say, help us find this solution. I first would look at our community data. What does our data tell us we need to do? And what does the data tell us where we should drive our resources, A? So what is the utilization of shelter beds in Springfield right now? What did past utilization look like? What do past costs of various shelter models look like as well? That's information that you need if you're going to make a decision right now about what to do. You need overflow shelter. The question is, where is it going to be, and how do you appropriately structure it so it doesn't balloon out of control and actually take away from the potential for people to go to other shelters that are funded to be a step in a more intensive step than what overflow shelter is. So I would ask for that information. I would also ask specifically how any shelter you're going to fund works with other current shelters. So you want to make sure you structure it correctly within the current system. I think that's information you need too. So if you're asking me, I would say that step one is to gather the information you need to know what your options are and to make a decision. And then I think I haven't seen a plan, so I can't argue against something I haven't seen. But those are the questions that I would be asking. What does our data say? What do best practices say? And realistically, what's the best use of our resources based on those two things? But everyone who experiences homelessness has a traumatic experience by virtue of homelessness, and most people do have a history of trauma as well. So they may also have a mental or behavioral health condition or a physical health condition co-occurring with substance use. What we have to do is we can't see these as segmented, siloed things to take care of in an order. It has to be holistic and taken care of together. So we work very closely, and we're grateful for all of our healthcare partners, and we do partner very closely with Memorial Behavioral Health, with SIU, what was a Trauma the Survivor Recovery Center, with St. John's, and with Central County's health centers as well. What the mayor was referring to is that build your team part. The team is your integrated health and housing core team that when you house people, and I also would ask all of you, if you want to ask, when an opportunity to house people in your ward comes up, please don't vote against it because of bias or misinformation. And I ask all of you that because all of you should at some point have that question come up. But I understand the viewpoint of you cannot just move people in and leave them and hope everything will be okay. So that build your team, second necessary ask, is that coordinated and innovative health and housing team that works and is dedicated to giving people the services they need to make housing stability as likely as possible. And we find, and other communities find, and we do too, because we've had quite a bit of success. When we do that well, we do stabilize people who previously were in crisis, and they often are very good neighbors who go on to be successful. So one piece of this is that you use your data to look at the sub-demographics most in need in your community. If we look at Springfield, people who are unsheltered probably fall in several different demographics. So I don't disagree that unsheltered is a demographic, but let's say, for example, we focused on chronic homelessness, veterans, and seniors. We probably would actually get most people who are unsheltered if we looked at that. So that's what I mean when I say, I think Alderman Donnellan, my step one, if I were you, would be to gather the information you need using our data to be able to make the decision. And I think that sometimes we don't necessarily make data-driven decisions. We make decisions based on what we saw when we drove down the street collectively. So I would highly encourage, and that's really, if you look at what Rockford did, number 3 on theirs was they use their data to drive good decisions and drive their resources to addressing highest needs and lowest served in their community.